The part of the methodology of the Florida Research Ensemble is based on the history and theory of writing, which I call grammatology, or it's related to the movement of grammatology. And the idea there is that is looking at the society of the spectacle and the whole issue of the rise of entertainment institutions, the new media and technology, is to see that in the context of apparatus theory. The term apparatus is started in media studies to refer to the idea of new technology as being a social machine. So it's not a technological determinism, kind of like the McLuhan thing is a bit of that, but rather it's the idea that cameras or the alphabet or the printing press, that these things are partly machine, but they're partly social. That is, they're invented in the context of a culture, of a civilization, which has certain kinds of desires and needs and hopes. So, I mean, for example, the invention of writing, in Egypt or ancient civilizations, and was often done in the context of an empire trying to keep track of its grain harvests in its empire, and the fear that it was being cheated and so on. And so you needed some way to keep records for economic purposes. So the people who invented writing, or in the case of the Chinese, the writing was invented to keep track of divination that was underway. The decision-making process by the empire used divination, and the ideograms were recording of divination readings of turtle shells that were baked and then cracked in certain directions. So people didn't have in mind Moby Dick or philosophy or something when they invented writing. So the apparatus theory is saying that there have really been three fundamental language technology epochs. There was orality, and we look at orality, the movement from orality to literacy, and we know quite a bit about that. Actually, there's been quite a bit of scholarship. We know a great deal about what happened in the shift from one to the other. And then that knowledge is used as an analogy for what's happening now. So the way you figure out, really, we're inside of the emergence of a new apparatus. Well, what's happening? And one of the ways, the way that grammatology orients that is in terms of looking at the analogy. Well, what happened when literacy emerged or was bootstrapped out of orality? You can get some sense of what's happening now or what needs to be done, really. I mean, this is part of the invention process. I mean, absolutely every feature of literacy was invented over time by the Greeks, but also in other civilizations. So we can get a sense of program. What do we need to do now? What should we watch out for? What are the opportunities for the new apparatus? So the way the apparatus theory structures this historical or epochal shift is in terms of three parts. So say the apparatus as a social machine consists of really three interactive elements in a matrix. One is, of course, the technology. Another one is institutional formation, the practices of the institution that are developed to make use of the technology. And the third leg of the stool, so to speak, is subject formation, identity formation on the part of the individuals who are living in this new institution, participating in its practices, begin to experience their lives in a different way. The way that works in orality is oral peoples, over a long period of time, invented natural language. I mean, this is we forget what's the technology of oral peoples. Well, it's natural language. It's being able to speak a language. Just symbol formation in that level is invented within orality. What's the institutional formation? What is the way in which that natural language was exploited to meet the needs of oral peoples for survival and to thrive? Well, at the collective level, the answer is religion. and at the practice, in terms of the institutional practices of religion, specifically ritual, is a kind of way of structuring information so it can be remembered and tapped into. And then in orality, in terms of subject formation, oral peoples experience themselves in terms of spirit. So we think of spirit or spirituality as a way to describe subject formation or identity experience in an oral culture. And a good example of that would be reading accounts, say by Native American shaman. Black Elk, for example, who was, as a very young man, was at the Battle of Little Bighorn. But he told his autobiography to an anthropologist. And when he describes himself, it's really typical of oral peoples, which is that there wasn't this firm boundary separating his person from the natural world. When oral peoples, or you just think about Homer's epics, when somebody has an idea, Ulysses or Agamemnon or something, it's recorded in terms of the gods speaking to them. Because for oral peoples, the world is magic. It's alive. Everything is alive. And when a bird makes a noise, it could as well be the voice of a god. So that was that permeability between the individual and the natural world. It was experienced as spirituality. It was the way oral peoples experienced themselves. And of course, as you know, oral peoples did not have the notion of an individual that we have. If you wanted to kill an oral person, you just ostracized them. They didn't have the idea of going off to Paris and writing the great American novel, that they weren't alienated, in other words, from their community. It's not part of their experience. So that was the oral situation. Of course, this is the apparatus theory is sketching that in very broad terms, but just to make sense at a high level of abstraction of what goes on. So then in literacy, as literacy emerges, typically among the classical Greeks, let's look at those three levels. Well, we know the technological part. The Greeks, for example, get the alphabet. Of course, there had already been writing for a while, but specifically alphabetic writing. The alphabet is a new invention. It really makes it possible for there to be a one-to-one relationship. A recording of the sound of speech flowing by can be captured and recorded in the written word, and then repeated. And so there was that technological innovation. And then over some hundreds of years, the Greeks were internalizing that, institutionalizing it, and ultimately Plato is given credit for finally being the kind of first. Maybe Socrates is actually the first individual, or even the way the historians say that Socrates is the first self in the Western world, the first person who experienced himself as what we think of as selfhood. So if we look at that in terms of the apparatus as a whole, the institutional practices for that part of the matrix, for the alphabetic technology, is school. Plato invents the academy. That's an invention. It's actually a collective institutional process, a new form of behavior. And for school, he and his colleagues invented some specific practices that what was the equivalent for ritual in orality in literacy is method. So Plato's Phaedrus is considered to be the first discourse on method in the Western tradition. It's an account of a formal procedure for organizing thought dialectically. And then, as we say, and of course that institutional invention continues. Aristotle was Plato's pupil.